Do humans have a type? In the Pokemon world, Pokemon are categorized by their types, which are based on their abilities. Some of them are born with these abilities, and some of them gain them as they evolve. These types are important because they cause certain attacks to get resisted, or even be super effective against others. So now say a human gets attacked, which is something we see happen often enough. How does the human take it? Does the type of attack matter? Humans in the Pokemon world have considerably higher endurance than in real life, as evidenced by Ash getting zapped and burnt all the time. But would being hit by a fighting type move be the worst thing ever for a human because humans are normal type? I mean, arguably, humans are normal type because, for one, the humanoid and Monica in PokeStar Studios were normal type, and for two, what else would they be? Could humans potentially evolve, in quotes, and become other types? Maybe if that is the case, that would influence why most trainers in the games specialize in a single Pokemon type, Well, I suppose this alone wouldn't mean all trainers are also that type. Let's look at fire breathers, for example. Sure, in their sprite they are breathing fire, but are they innately able to do that? Do they have a fire sac in their body? No. Rather, they are breathing fire the same way real fire breathers do. Yeah, that's a thing. If you didn't know, fire breathing is done in various performances to entertain an audience. The fire breather will put a fuel source with a low flash point in their mouth, and then spit it out in a way that makes a mist. Then, all it needs is something hot enough to ignite it as it comes out, and voila, it looks like you're breathing fire, when really you're just spitting out ethanol or cornstarch. So applying this to the Pokemon world, sure, the humans doing this are using a fire-type attack, but otherwise are still just normal humans, just as susceptible to burns as the rest are. Similarly, hikers and miners aren't rock and ground type any more than people with tasers are electric type. Wearing a full suit of armor may grant you steel-type resistances and weaknesses, but it doesn't change the type of the human inside of it. Rather, these are examples of humans having tools that give them attacks or moves that would be considered those types. You know what I mean. But then we have Avery, whose Pokeballs are floating around his hat all the time. Is this his own psychic power, or are his psychic-type Pokemon inside of the balls doing it themselves? Well, how about Olympia or Sabrina? They are all clearly shown having their own psychic powers. Clearly, they are psychic types themselves. But how is such a thing possible? Well, maybe we should start the explanation off with the easy ones. First of all humans are clearly normal type by default. I mean, Ash had to have had a stab bonus with strength to be able to lift that log. But I think humans in the Pokemon world would be considered super versatile, not just with their intelligence and ability to invent and use tools that gives them different types of attacks, but they are also capable of adding or changing their type. And the easiest example of this, by far, is fighting type. In episode 2 of Pokemon Twilight Wings, we see the gym leader Bee training with her Machop, Machoke, and Machamp. And in some instances, she's even outperforming them. Oh man, what a Mary Sue! So if Bee does a low kick or a cross chop, are they fighting type moves? Well, I'd argue yes. But what about her as a human being? Well, one of the defining features of fighting type Pokemon is a honed muscular body, and plenty of fighting skill to go along with it. Basically, the opposite of me. But that for sure fits Bee. Heck, it fits all of the fighting type gym leaders, besides Corina. Or is it Corina? I'm gonna get in trouble. But there is one other thing with the fighting type. A strong sense of justice to back up the strength in the body is what makes the Swords of Justice fighting type, for example. And Hala certainly fits that description. But compared to the other gym leaders and even other fighting type trainers like black belts, Corina certainly seems to be physically the weakest and least muscular. The rollerblade still suggests some level of athleticism though, just more cardio, I suppose. Maybe that's the idea because she has Lucario and that sounds like cardio. I hope that's not what they were thinking. But anyway, her body structure is less fighting type and more just speed and endurance. So, since we're typing trainers right now, I'd argue that Korina is still normal type as a person, she just happens to train fighting type Pokemon. Perhaps she's on her way to becoming fighting type herself. Another, maybe easy type to look into is Dark. The Dark type isn't about the aura power of darkness. Rather, it's basically the evil or mean type. People say it actually means evil in Japanese, but the word is a little more complicated than that. It's more so just like low-handed, mean, rude, dirty tactics. That's all what the Japanese name implies, not necessarily a being of pure evil or anything. So, could some of these dark type trainers be dark type themselves too? The delinquents, for instance. Well, they are always getting into trouble, lying, cheating, stealing, and picking on those weaker than them. Their personality is certainly similar to many Dark-type Pokemon. Bullies, sneaky weasels, and cat burglars and all. But is an attitude enough? Any person or Pokemon has the ability to be mean or have a lapse in judgment, which I guess is explainable in moves. Most Pokemon can learn a Dark-type move or two. Heck, Bite is Dark-type. But to innately be Dark type is to have this mindset be your entire persona. It defines you, which we certainly see in the way a lot of these trainers present themselves. They act all mean and tough, but I'm sure one skilled fighter could take them all down. But would this attitude make these humans immune to psychic attacks, like Dark-type Pokemon? Arguably, yeah. The reasoning behind Dark being immune to Psychic deserves a video all to itself, but to keep it simple, the same things that make Dark-type Pokemon immune would also work for Dark-type humans too. And basically, it's that their mind is so twisted and like not normal because they think these dark thoughts all the time that a psychic attack has a much harder time figuring out how to hurt that because it's an abnormal way of thinking. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that's the gist. Ghost type is another one that I can see humans gaining, not because they become ghosts themselves, but because they gain ghostly abilities, similar to why Decidueye is ghost type. In Pokemon Gold and Silver, we straight up see possessed spirit mediums going crazy and speaking in tongues. There are also plenty of notable ghost type Pokemon trainers with the ability to see and communicate with ghosts. Phoebe talks about her talking with ghosts. Morty talks about being able to see what others cannot. Alistair's friends are all ghosts, and his eyes straight up glow. Spooky, but not as spooky as some of what the Hex Maniacs do. Ooh, and Hex Maniacs, they combine ghost and psychic Pokemon, so they may also have ghost and psychic abilities. Some of them seemingly are ghosts even, clearly deserving the ghost type. But speaking of psychic, I guess we gotta get into that now. We see throughout the franchise that no other human power is quite as powerful and innate as the power belonging to the psychic type people. Most recently, we can see Avery straight up using his own psychic powers of telekinesis to have his Pokeballs orbit his hat. And this is nothing new. Many psychic type trainers have sprites showcasing similar abilities, and in the anime, the psychic abilities of Sabrina and Olympia are on par with some Pokemon, and Caitlyn has psychic energy emanating from her at all times, causing her hair to float. To claim that these humans aren't psychic type is just to kid yourself, really. But how would a human go from being a normal type human to a psychic type one? The other types make a bit of sense. Intense exercise and combat training for fighting type, a dark and twisted mindset and way of upbringing and way of life for dark type, getting possessed or influenced by ghosts, and ghost Pokemon to eventually develop ghostly abilities of your own for ghost type, but Psychic type Pokemon can't just grant their abilities to other, but maybe this isn't something that can be easily trained. Sabrina mentions that she's had crazy abilities since birth, and the twins Tate and Lisa have had a psychic connection since birth too. Is it just something innate to some humans, a chosen one sort of scenario, or was it a sort of mutation lottery? Their brains just happened to develop in some perfect way that grants them these abilities, sort of like the X-Men. I have a feeling that that is the case for most psychics in Pokemon. Caitlyn had her powers awaken just one day, and she nearly ruined her life because she didn't know how to control them. And here's a quote from her: "Having no psychic powers at all is better than having psychic powers you can't control." And being focused on sleeping all the time, as well as always having a Musharna, leads me to believe that she's all about using her psychic powers to sort of astral project while asleep. Basically, astral projection is when you detach your mind or soul from your body to experience things outside of our plane of existence. But training to gain these abilities may still be possible. In Gold and Silver, when on the Pokegear phone with Sabrina, one of her lines has her say, "I'll tell you a little bit about a psychic's training. Psychic ability is the power to influence people. You close your eyes and clear your mind of excessive thoughts. Then you look hard at your sleeping self. That's it. True psychics aren't the kind who can move things around with their minds. It's all about controlling your own mind." We also see that many of the psychic class of trainers are wearing traditional martial art training robes. Think like Shaolin monks, training to hone their body and mind. But in the Pokemon world, they go beyond this and gain crazy levels of telekinesis. While none of this doesn't confirm that they were completely normal at one point, it does show that they have to train to further their abilities. Perhaps then it is something you are born with, and other psychics sense when new psychics are born and put them through training in order to avoid situations like that of Caitlyn's, where her powers awakened suddenly and she put herself and those around her in danger. But then what about aura? While the aura sensing ability is mainly associated with Lucario, Lucario isn't psychic type, but it's still hard to argue that sensing such forces doesn't have some connection to a psychic ability. Similar to psychic abilities, aura sensing powers are something that can be trained to advance, but may also be something you have to be born with. In the Lucario movie, it is mentioned that Ash happens to have the same type of aura as Sir Aaron, the Aura Guardian, and thus, upon wielding the same gloves and staff, Ash gains the same abilities. But wait, hold on then. Ash had no training. Is the aura sensing attached more so to the person or to the magical tools they have? At which point it's no different than wielding a sword and armor to be steel type. Ugh. Aura is just confusing all this. I guess it's similar to, say, an enchanted wizard's orb, but one that only certain people can use, I guess. People who happen to be born with the ability to use it. And what type would aura sensing even be? Psychic, but in a different way? Fighting, but in a more spiritual, heightened senses way? I'll have to dig way more into aura for its own video later. For now, though, there's not enough evidence to say conclusively that anyone has the potential to become psychic or not. But for sure, plenty of humans in the Pokemon world are psychic type. I mean, according to the Pokedex, one kid turned into a Kadabra at some point, possibly just because his psychic powers got so crazy that they metamorphized him into actually becoming a Pokemon because he already had Pokemon powers. I don't know. That Pokedex entry is really weird. And why a Kadabra and not an Abra? But are there any other types that humans are capable of becoming? I think so. I think there's one more for sure, and it might be the creepiest. Fairy type. Creepy only because it seems to cause physical deformities in the eyes. The Fairy Tale girls and the gym leader Valerie have these massive bug-like eyes. In another video that I'll link to here, I talk about her city's 13-hour clock and what the Fairy Tale witching hour is all about. So clearly some level of supernatural happenstance is occurring in this city. Time flows strangely in fairy realms, and humans can become attuned to it. Perhaps by staying in this area too long and hanging around fairy types constantly. We can hear some of the Fairy Tale girls say things like,
"All you have to do is ignore reality and you can stay young forever too."
And,
"I won't tell you how old I really am, but I can say I'm old enough to be your mother."
despite still looking like a little girl. And in Sword and Shield, we find a little girl in Hammerlock Town who gives you an old letter that is described as feeling extremely old to deliver to a friend. That friend happens to live in Ballenly, the town in the middle of a magical forest. And he's a middle-aged man. You give him the letter and he reminisces about this friend in the past. And when you go back to where the little girl was, she's gone. But back in the magical forest house, there are other little girls, seemingly talking to the walls and doing other such crazy things. Perhaps, like the ghost trainers, they can see things that others cannot. Fairies that exist in this realm, and being exposed to this fairy realm long enough, or since birth, may grant them some fairy-type abilities, like aging much slower and developing these creepy eyes. Ilima, a normal type trainer with the same eyes, is the only hole in this theory, but the super convincing theory that he and the fairy type trainer Mina had their roles swapped in development fills that gap. So, these are the types that I feel humans are capable of innately becoming. Normal, fighting, dark, ghost, psychic, fairy. Thanks to human ingenuity, they can use tools to gain abilities and moves of just about every type though. Jetpack or wingsuit, flying type. Water gun or a fire hose, water. Mining equipment, ground. The list goes on. But these, as I said, are outside of the self. But there is still one last problem with all this. If humans are normal type by default, then why do ghost type attacks still work against them? Perhaps humans truly are typeless by default then. Maybe a special human type. And maybe in being typeless, they become easily adaptable and resilient, able to become a variety of types depending on their lifestyle. Who knows really? This video is just fun speculation, discussion stuff. But now, what if we were to actually design a Pokemon based off of a human and human development? What would that Pokemon look like? What would its abilities be? That's exactly what True Green 7's video covers right here, so go check that out, I super recommend it. And until next time, you never stop using your noggin.